I call this meeting to order. Good evening. This is the July 26, 2023 meeting of the San Francisco County Transportation Authority, or Community Advisory Committee, or CAC. I'm Kevin Ortiz. I'm the chair of the CAC. Before I give the report, I'd like to ask Elijah Saunders, our clerk this evening, to do a roll call to make sure that we have quorum, and then he's going to read an announcement about public comment.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, Member Bars. Bars absent. Member Chen.
Chen present.
Chen present. Member Daniels.
Daniels present.
Daniels present. Member Davidson. Davidson absent. Member Ho. Oh, excuse me. Member Ho is no longer with us. Okay, Member Kim.
Kim's here.
Kim present. Member Levine.
Levine here.
Levine present. Member Ortega.
Ortega present.
Ortega present. Chair Ortiz.
Ortiz present.
Ortiz present. Member Roselle. Roselle absent. And Vice Chair Siegel. Siegel is absent as well. Chair, we have quorum.
Great, thank you. So, do you want to read about public comment?
So sorry, thank you. Public comment will be available for each item on this agenda via telephone by calling one of the numbers listed on the front of the agenda or joining the meeting through the Zoom link. Once you join, you will be able to listen to the meeting as a participant. To make public comment on an item, members of the public participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the raise hand feature or dial *9. Do not press *9 again, or you'll be removed from the queue. When you're asked to unmute yourself, press *6 or the unmute button to unmute yourself. The live operator will advise that you will be allowed 2 minutes to speak. When your 2 minutes are up, we will move on to the next caller. Best practices are to speak slowly, clearly, and turn down the volume of any televisions or radios around you. Thank you. That concludes my announcement.
Great, thank you, Clerk Saunders. We're going to move on to item number 2, the chair's report. Clerk Saunders sent CAC members the executive director's report from the July 25th Transportation Authority board meeting. The report is also available on the agency's website at www.sfcta.org. At its June 2023 meeting, the California Transportation Commission, or CTC, approved $5 million in one-time local partnership program, or LPP, incentives funds to reward San Francisco for passing Prop L in November 2022. These funds are available to the Transportation Authority as the eligible taxing authority with a new or renewed voter-approved tax, toll, or fee dedicated solely to transportation improvements. The incentive funds, along with $3.44 million in San Francisco's LPP formula program funds, are available for programming and allocation through June 30th, 2026. Staff plans to present LPP project priorities to the CAC and board later this fiscal year. To help inform development of its active communities plan, SFMTA is hosting a series of bike rides around the city and in partnership with local organizations. SFMTA has hosted rides in D1, 2, and 4 over the past few weeks and has 2 more rides coming up. There will be a District 5 ride that will meet at Turk and Fillmore at 2 p.m. this Friday, July 28th, and also a ride in the LMI area of District 7s and 11 on August 5th that will meet at 11:30 at Temple United Methodist Church. More info is available at SFMTA/projects/active communities plan. I encourage everyone to provide input on this plan. We're also going to, on a side note, also planning a ride for District 9 as well. So we'll keep you all informed of that. SFMTA has amended its contract with the company that operates the city's red light camera system to expand the program by 8 additional locations in Districts 2, 5, and 6, and to extend the contract by 5 years to 2028. Cameras currently enforce 19 approaches at 13 intersections. The new locations are under design, and once construction is complete, cameras will enforce a total of 27 approaches at 21 intersections. SFMTA says these cameras have resulted in a 66% citywide drop in injury collisions resulting from red light running between 1997 and 2022. I'm also pleased to see item 6, the SFMTA quick build update on our agenda tonight. The CAC requested quarterly updates from the SFMTA on the rollout of the quick build projects, as these are an essential tool for the success of Vision Zero. Switching gears for a moment, as some of you may already know, Calvin Ho has given up his seat on the CAC as he has taken a new position as a legislative aide in the D8 office. We will miss Calvin being part of the CAC, but wish him all the best in his new position. Now for meeting management, CAC members, if you would like to speak, you can indicate by doing so by standing your name card on its end, so it is pointing up. I ask CAC members and presenters to wait until I call on you to speak, then press the red star on the base of the microphone to turn it on. You should see a red light on below the mouthpiece. Please turn off the microphone when it's done speaking by pressing the red star again. Be sure to speak directly into the microphone so folks in the back room can hear you. Please limit your questions to a max of 2 questions per agenda item. Presenters, please only respond to questions if requested by the chair. CAC members and folks in the hearing room, please turn off or silence all electronic devices and computer notifications during the meeting. Please step outside to the elevator lobby if you must talk or do anything else that might be picked up by the microphones. Okay, if that's it for announcements, are there any questions or comments from CAC members on the chair's report? Seeing none, let's move it open to public comment.
Do we have any in-person public comment from the chair's report? Seeing none, Danielle, can we open it up to remote public comment, please?
Just a moment. Okay. Oh, we have a hand, okay, okay, caller, you could unmute yourself, please. Your 2 minutes begins now. To unmute yourself, please press star 9 or star 6. Oh, there you are. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, this is Roland. Could somebody please let me in the Zoom meeting, please? They're waiting for host to start the meeting.
Roland, are you sure using the right Zoom link? I don't put you in our participant.
It says CAC meeting. Okay, the window I've got says CAC meeting. This is a recurring meeting waiting for host to start the meeting.
Right,
Please
I
wait.
recently had to change the Zoom. You joined with the Zoom link from this meeting's agenda?
Yeah,
Okay, well, maybe exit out and try to join again, but we're gonna need to move on. Thank you.
all right, but then please forward me the link because this is not working. I'm not getting any video. Thank you.
Yeah, if we could just send Roland the link whenever we get a chance, and then, you know, if he wants to speak, we're happy to have him speak public comment on it. Let's move on to the consent agenda and we'll see if he's able to get on during that time. So items 3 through 5 comprise the consent agenda. Staff is not planning to present on these items. If the CAC member wishes, any of these items may be removed and considered separately. Do we have any questions or comments on the consent agenda? For members? Seeing none, is there any public comment on the consent agenda?
Seeing no in-person public comment, Daniela, can we open it up to a remote public comment?
Okay, see one public comment. Okay, I think that might be Roland still. Roland, is that you?
Yeah, this is Roland. Please, could you please lower my hand once I'm done speaking for me, please? Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Roland, your 2 minutes starts now. Oh, did you want to speak, Roland, or
Yeah, I
was
think we
that-
lost.
Okay, all right, all right.
I think we lost Ron.
There's no
Do we have any other
public comment.
further public comment?
No.
I think we'll create some space when Roland comes back. Sweet, so we're gonna come on now to item 6, which is going
Excuse me,
to,
Chair.
I'm sorry,
We need to take a,
can we do the same house, same call?
we need to have one vote first and then.
Okay,
vote
you're right.
So do we have a motion on the minutes?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Levine. Do we have a second?
Or take a second.
Ortega seconds. So item 3, the minutes moved by Levine, seconded by Ortega. On the minutes, member Bars absent. Member Chen.
Chen, I.
Chen, I. Member Daniels.
Daniels, I.
Daniels, I. Member Davidson absent. Member Kim. Kim, I. Kim, I. Member Levine.
Levine, aye.
Levine, I. Member Ortega.
Ortega, I.
Ortega, I. Chair Ortiz.
Ortiz, aye.
Ortiz, I. Member Roselle, absent, and Vice Chair Siegel, absent. There are 6 ayes. The minutes are approved.
Let's move on to item 6. Well, real quick, do we have Roland back on?
We just sent him the link.
Okay,
I see his phone number back on, but I don't see him, but his hand's not up, so.
okay. Anytime that he wants to come and make public comment, we can, we'll open it up again. So let's move on to item 6, which is the SFTA Vision Zero Quick Build Program Project Update. This is an informational that's requested for quarterly updates from the CAC members. Real quick, we're going to be having Jen Wong, Vision Zero Quick Build Program Manager from the SFMTA presenting, along with SFCTA and SFMTA staff being remote and available as well too. I will say after the presentation, we're going to do things a little bit differently. I want to open it up first for public comment, and then from there, we're going to then have a discussion on it. I think we tend to learn a lot from our public comment folks here, right? So particularly, I want to be able to have an opportunity to hear from public first prior to making a move on the discussion. And that should be in accordance with parliamentary procedures. Right, Elijah?
Let me double check with Maria. We do also have council online, but let me double check during the presentation.
Jen, whenever you're ready.
Okay, great. Is everyone seeing my slides just fine?
Yes.
Great. All right. Thank you for confirming. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Jen Wong. I'm a transportation planner and also the Quick Build Program Manager with SFMTA. And tonight I'll be providing an update on various corridor projects of this program. I'll start off with Valencia Street. This is a pilot project that was approved 3 months ago and has been in construction since. It's been an all hands on deck effort in order to install the new protected center running bike lane and on-street parking and loading changes. This is the first time we're doing this, and it involves a lot of new materials on San Francisco streets that's specifically ordered for this project. This includes black and white bus curbs and also K71 bollards, which are these larger looking plastic delineators. Construction is anticipated to be complete next month, and project manager Kimberly Leung and Brian Liang are also in attendance with me to answer any additional questions about Valencia at the end. So although Valencia has been in the spotlight, we have a couple of other projects that are waiting in the wings to hit construction. Both the Lake Merced and Bay Shore Quick Build projects are also in preparation mode to go right in after Valencia. Lake Merced is one of our longest project corridors with 5 distinct sections due to its various roadway characteristics. But taken all together, the project will feature protected bikeways, traffic calming, and new bus boarding islands. Meanwhile, the Bayshore project will also have protected bikeways, traffic calming, and more. We also had a bunch of open house events this spring, which is a major milestone for our projects. So most recently, the Hyde Street project presented 2 alternatives, both of which include a road diet and bus only lane, the difference being a protected bike lane. So the project team is now looking through survey results and all the feedback that has been collected so far. The 17th Street project also had an open house last month. And the scope of this project includes upgrading existing bike lanes to protected bike lanes. And the team is also working closely with major institutions along that corridor, like the Future Flower Mart. Next, we have Lincoln Way, which is actually our longest corridor project at almost 3 miles, covering nearly the entire southern border of Golden Gate Park. And During the open house period, the team received over 800 comments from over 550 respondents. There's also a lot of coordination that's happening for this project too. Pedestrian safety improvements along this corridor would be completed with other MTA projects to install speed radar signs and transit improvements that are brought by the 29 Sunset Improvement Project. And installation is expected to begin this fall. And in total, the project plans to install 20 new crosswalks, 12 painted safety zones, additional left turn safety treatments, daylighting, signal head upgrades to make the lenses bigger, and a whole suite of other traffic signal improvements. Slope Boulevard also had an open house. That was in April, and the project was approved by SFCTA board last week. The project involves protected bike lanes, and that's particularly important for this corridor as it serves as a valuable connection between the Great Highway Promenade and also the Lake Merced improvements that I mentioned earlier. So we look forward to seeing this in construction this year as well. And as I said, the open house milestones are really exciting for us because it's our chance to present design proposals and all of the background work that went into it. But here are just a couple more projects that I want to highlight. Oak Street and Sutter Street are projects that are just getting started. The Oak Street project takes place on the roadway alongside the Panhandle, and then Sutter Street will focus in on the Market to Polk area. So as these projects are getting underway, I highly encourage you to visit sfmta.com/quickbuild, where you can find all of our projects listed there. And then lastly, I just wanted to share with you all something called the Quick Build Toolkit project. So this is a new initiative that we will be undertaking, which is an effort to install proven core safety treatments on all the remaining parts of our high-injury network where we still need to do some work. And based on a recent study that was completed, we are implementing tools like daylighting, the pedestrian head start timing, painting safety zones, and other treatments at specific and targeted locations. And we will be developing a mapping tool to track our progress of that as well. We anticipate that effort to be in the range of $5 to $6 million. And we are committed to carrying out that initiative along with completing the 17 corridor projects that are currently funded and in progress. And that concludes my update. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jen. Do we have public comment?
Do you have any in-person public comment?
Public comment?
Yep.
Okay. Edward Mason, I would question how much money have we spent on this entire project from beginning to now? How many millions of dollars have we spent on this? Everything that's there plus in the history. Second question is, I think we have a culture that does not respect safety. And that is reflective of sideshows, people getting carjacked. A perfect example was the event at the 19th and Sanchez this weekend. So we're trying to engineer our way around bad culture and safety. And is there any interest in trying to improve the safety culture of the community in this area? Don't know, but that's something to be looked at, I think. And lastly, in Smart City Dive, and I recommend everyone take advantage of that on the internet. It's a very good publication. comes out saying what's happening in other segments of government. In there, they talked about using artwork along the pedestrian right of way. And so when the automobiles see the artwork that's in the pedestrian with different colors or whatever, that there may be some slowing down of the automobile as they approach the crosswalks. So it doesn't agree with the federal handbook, whether that may be updated, who knows, but at least it's being tested in other portions of the country. And I'll send a email to the CAC referencing that document that is in there. But I strongly recommend reading Smart City Dive. And the other issue is Route 50 is another excellent document that I adhere to and read. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mason. Is there any remote public comment, operator?
Checking for remote public comment. There is one. And Roland, go ahead. Your 2 minutes begins now. So to unmute yourself, Roland, you'll need to hit *6. There we go. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm actually clicking. It's a long story. Anyway, I have a very quick question to the chair, if you know the answer. It's about the timing for the pedestrian crossing. The timing is whether you set it to the distance of the crossing divided by 1.5, because the speed at which a mobility impaired person is able to travel is at 1.5 feet per second. And if it's another answer, that's also okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Roland.
Also, real quick, does Roland want to make any comments on? Real quick, does Roland want to make any comments, particularly on the chair's report? I know he wasn't able to make it earlier due to some technical issues. So I want to provide the opportunity.
No, I do not. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There's no further public comment. Oh,
Great,
also
thank you.
one reminder, if I see a few folks presenting that if you could please add your name and the organization that you're with, that would be really helpful for all of us. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Let's open it up to questions from the CAC members. Member Ortega.
Hi, I just wanted to thank everyone for the update on the Vision Zero presentation. I did have a few questions regarding the Valencia Bike Street update. There was an article published in the SF Chronicle recently that talked about some of the mixed reception to the receiving of the bike lane, and I did want to point out 2 key points in regards to the safety. One, I'd like to understand plans for the merge. Several of my friends that have taken this and comments listed in the SF Chronicle article talk about how, well, once you're in the bike lane in the center of Valencia Street, it feels much safer. The merge to get into the center bike lane from the side feels extremely unsafe, because now you're not only crossing like traffic, it's in the timing of the lights. And as things, we all know that cars are not always the most favorable to crossing bike traffic. So I want to understand better the plan on how we're going to make the merge safer if we continue with this pilot program. And then second, also noted in the article and stuff I've seen as well, and I'm sure Chair Ortiz has seen it, even though we have no left turns and U-turns posted on the street, I don't see it being enforced, and that people are still doing illegal left turns and U-turns. And I'd like to understand the enforcement that we're going to do, so that way the safety features that we're gaining from having this siloed lane is still kept. So those would be my 2 comments and requests for future updates on. Thank you.
Member Ortega, Jen and team.
Yes, I can respond to some of the previous comments that have been submitted so far. And then I can also invite Kimberly Leung to speak directly on the Valencia Street comments as well. I think previously there was a comment regarding the pedestrian signal timing. I can share with you all that our standard is for people to cross the street at a rate of 3 feet per second. This is more time than our previous standard that was 3.5 feet per second. And this is a general rule that we use to apply for all pedestrian signals, especially since our intersections can have some pretty funky geometry and are not necessarily all the same widths and sizes. And to the earlier comment about how much money we've spent on all quick builds, I believe our allocation requests year to year have been in the range of 4 to 6. I think probably averaging around $5 million per year to support this program. And I'm sure other staff from the TA can help further share on that. I appreciate the commenter pointing out those resources. I'm personally interested. And I will share that we currently do have a program that's getting started on adding artwork to our streets. This is through our Slow Streets mural program, which I find to be pretty exciting. And yeah, I totally agree about fostering a culture of safety for our streets. And at this point, I will invite either Kimberly or Brian, my colleagues, to speak on Valencia. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kimberly Leung, and I'm the project manager for the Valencia Bikeway project. So there were 2 questions that I specifically heard just now. The first one was regarding the plans for the merge. So the Center Running Bikeway pilot currently runs between 15th and 23rd Streets. And at both of those intersections on the project limit ends, there have been bike signals that were installed on July 7th. So with those bike signals, what happens is that we first have a bike phase that allows bikes that are going northbound and southbound to transition from the center running bikeways to side running or vice versa. After that, there's a red signal that is shown to those bikes. And then cars going northbound, southbound will get a green light. Following that, traffic going east-west will then get a green light. So we're separating out the bikes from the vehicles that are traveling northbound and southbound. And then regarding the comment about the no left turns and the enforcement for that, we have been working with the police department since the end of April when those signs were first installed. As we all know, there's just a lot of different, competing needs in the city, but PD is supporting us as much as they can. But also on the enforcement front, we do have PCOs, so parking control officers from the MTA that are helping with the parking and loading regulations that have now been introduced on the corridor.
Great, thank you, Kimberly, and good to see you. Let's move over to Member Davidson.
I support everything that Member Ortega said about the Valencia bicycle lane. I also have been following the issue, even though I'm representative for District 11. I still use the Valencia bicycle lane. But have been following it closely, as well as use it on a pretty regular basis. And parking enforcement, just vehicle protocol driving enforcement, and even the signage for the bicycle lane itself has been obstructing the bicycle way, and it does feel pretty dangerous. So I'm very conflicted and curious about understanding how the SFMTA is evaluating the success or the demise of this bicycle pilot, the center running bicycle lane. And I don't want it to take an accident or a fatality by a cyclist or any pedestrian for us to recognize that this middle lane is not the right answer. And as a cyclist myself, who rides all the time, the merges are scary, the signage is scary, and the vehicles parking in the middle of the side, is also scary. So I want to say that. I also want to advocate for the Lake Merced, John Muir, and Skyline Boulevard. I hope that protected bicycle lanes will also be part of the Skyline Boulevard, because Skyline is a high-speed roadway. So any bicycle or pedestrian infrastructure needs to be protected on that roadway. There are cars that drive 60 miles an hour on that roadway. So if it's not separated from the road, it won't be used. And also advocating that there is a connection to Lake Merced from District 11. So specifically, there's Brotherhood Way, which does have a separated sidewalk that is in such disrepair that it's not usable. But if it were refurbished, it could provide a really nice protected connection from District 11 into Lake Merced. And it seems a natural pathway. So I want to flag both the Valencia safety issues as well as advocate for continued protected infrastructure for Lake Merced with a connection point to District 11's Brotherhood Way. Thank you.
Sure, I'm happy to address the comments that you had regarding the Valencia project. So specifically regarding the signage that is currently still in the center of the bikeway. And we do really appreciate everyone's patience. Even with the bike signals coming on at the beginning of July, we still had ongoing work along the corridor. So our shops were still putting in the curb plan along the curbs. So the new loading and parking regulations, those signs associated with it. And we still had work along the bikeway itself with the installation of new bollards. So we appreciate everyone's patience as we've been kind of wrapping up that work. We're working closely with our shops right now to determine when we can kind of wrap up that work and get those barricades out. But we're hoping to have an announcement about that within the next week or so. Regarding kind of the evaluation as well as education pieces of the project, I'll turn that over to Brian to share a bit about that.
Yeah, thanks for having us here tonight. So MTA is working on various educational materials to help users of the bikeway, users of Valencia Street better navigate some of the new regulations and some of the new configurations on the street. So that stuff is in the works right now, and we plan on rolling it out throughout the summer. And just to give you guys an idea of what's coming out, we'll have a number of virtual content or digital content that we posted on social media, as well as our own project and project website, as well as a educational video that we're producing at the moment that we plan on releasing and sharing with members of the media to help get the word out there on overall education, how to navigate the bikeway. In terms of the evaluation, because the pilot hasn't officially started yet, we haven't actually gone into the formal evaluation period, but we have been reviewing feedback that we've been receiving from members of the public and working as quickly as we can to resolve some of the issues that have come up through the construction process. And we are committed to ensuring that construction is as smooth as possible. We know that there have been some issues that have been brought up, but we are working quickly to resolve everything that we're hearing on the street.
Thank you. Let's move over to Member Daniels.
Good evening. I had a few questions. I was going to share just a comment about an incident that I experienced on Valencia Street, and maybe just to help add to the conversation. I think there are a lot of modes of transportation, and adding the autonomous vehicles made for a very interesting dilemma on Saturday. As I was in my church parking lot on Valencia, a bike exited the middle center lane in between the bulbs, and an autonomous vehicle was coming down the street, and I guess it's automatically programmed for any like certain amount of feet to the vehicle. It attempted to pull out of traffic and then had a very difficult time to get back into traffic as cars were going by. I actually got trapped inside of the driveway. I had to call 311 and non-emergency to have this car removed from in front of the place so I could get out. But just the thought of like all of these different modes of transportation and adding the autonomous vehicles, how that's gonna work with bicycles exiting the center lane, I think that's just another point of thought. That is not my question though. My questions are actually around the Evans Avenue, Hunters Point, Ennis Avenue built completed project and the Evans Avenue, Cesar Chavez to 3rd Street. It's more along the lines of Member Davidson's question around what is the success data around how this quick build project has actually served its purpose versus the unintended consequences like vehicle collisions or traffic congestion. I'm using this daily and I really do not see the benefit. I see maybe 2 bikes using the bike lane on this corridor, but I experience almost an extra 45 minutes of traffic, which is usually a 5-minute drive. So my question is, where is the data?
Jen, are you still on with us?
Yes, just looking for the buttons. Yes, thank you for those comments and those questions. Speaking specifically on the quick build projects on Evans Avenue and also on the Evans, Ennis, and Hunters Point Boulevard corridors, which have been completed. I believe that at least one of these projects is still undergoing evaluation period. Typically, our projects do take a little bit of time post completion in order for us to take a measure of regular traffic behavior and flow. So I believe one of these projects we will be collecting data in the fall after school starts. I think if you are interested in the results of those evaluations, I'm happy to report back or include information from our Safe Streets evaluation program, which is involved for each one of these projects. I know that for our Evans, Ennis, and Hunters Point Boulevard corridor project, there are some continuing outreach for that project post completion to hear specifically some of these issues that you raise, and I believe there could be adjustments to the corridor as a result.
If you could please forward any information, it's appreciated.
Will do.
Thank you, Member Daniels. I have a few questions myself. And so particularly my first question was on, how far we are from completing the quick build program on the high entry network to date. And then what the estimated forecast of the total completion and when completed with the timeline.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Charities, I believe a lot of that work will be completed through our new initiative, which is the Quick Build Toolkit project. And really the intent of that effort is to provide that coverage throughout the high entry network in all of the remaining parts of the high entry network that we still have work to do. Based on our estimates, we believe there is roughly 50 miles remaining of the high entry network that we need to tackle.
And just remind me real quick, Jen, so it was supposed to complete, I think, a couple of months ago when we had gotten the last presentation on this. It was about completing by the end of next year, correct? For the high entry network?
That's correct. I believe we are targeting for the end of 2024.
Okay, but there's no way that's going to end up happening.
I believe I've heard from from my leadership that we are committed to that effort and that we are prioritizing it through our staff resources and the availability of our planners, our engineers, our field operations crews, our paint shops, sign shops, signal shops, meter shops, all the shops. And again, we'll be all hands on deck effort.
Okay, yeah, just, I've also been hearing that it probably might be getting pushed back a little bit, just sort of resetting some new goals. But it's interesting kind of concept with developing a toolkit to have at least kind of real-time updates on where things are at, kind of going from there. I actually had a couple of second questions, particularly around daylighting standards, for, you know, intersections, that are being, implementing with the Quick Build program. Particularly on, I've heard, you know, that sometimes that the standard is 20 feet for daylighting, sometimes it's 10 feet for daylighting. And I'm just wondering particularly what the overall standard is when it comes to daylighting on projects that the SFMTA and SFCTA uses as it's kind of like core competency.
Yeah, I believe daylighting, the footage of daylighting, I believe, varies, and that's due to a combination of characteristics such as vehicle speeds and the width of the street. I believe engineers use a specific formula to help determine those locations, but a general rule of thumb is 10 feet for a stop-controlled intersection, you know, assuming that drivers are expected to come to a full stop at those locations. And at signal-controlled locations, a general rule of thumb is 20 feet.
So the signal is actually 20 feet, so it's actually a higher standard, even though like for stop controlled that would be essentially a stop sign, right? Correct.
Yes, that's
I'm just
correct.
trying to understand. So it's less for a stop sign than an actual traffic signal.
Yeah, I believe the idea is that drivers should be coming to a full stop up to the stop bar of that intersection.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my third question real quick is I've heard some businesses are concerned about the Quick Build project, particularly for the 17th Street Ventura. You know, bike lanes kind of coming in. I'm just wondering, particularly around the community engagement and outreach efforts that have been done, particularly around the concerns for 17th Street. You know, 17th Street is, I think, from my understanding, the longest bike lane in the entire city, right? So obviously having it being a protected bike lane in the network is very important, right? Especially as we're trying to hit our high injury goals. But I'm just wondering, particularly around some of the concerns that some of the small businesses are facing, particularly around, especially as like time for economic recovery is critical for our small businesses.
Yeah, I believe the 17th Street project team has been engaging with all the businesses of various sizes. Certainly there are the large institutions and music venues and flower mart developments, but our project teams also do outreach to our small mom and pop businesses as well in order to understand their loading activities and their passenger pickups and commercial deliveries. If you're interested in knowing a little bit more about the 17th Street outreach engagement process, I'm happy to connect you directly with those project team members.
That'd be great. And I think if you could send that over to Member Daniels as well too, since that's her district. Yeah, and I would also just see if you could also send over the formula for daylighting standards as well too, particularly that the traffic engineers use. I think that'll be really helpful. And yeah. Do we have any other? Oh yeah, Member Kim?
Yeah, I have a similar question, Member Daniels. Normally the evaluation period, you have a standard time, for example, after implementation, a month later, a month to 3 months, like grace period, after 3 months, you evaluate, you know, so after 6 months, you get data and then you see any improvement, any problem. So do you have any standard period for evaluation?
Yeah, I will actually invite my colleague Brian to jump in here since he's actually very involved with our evaluation program.
Hello again, everybody. Brian Liang, Evaluation Program Manager for Mobile Streets. So the standard is typically 3 months, just because after we install a project, there is a typical, I would say, learning period for people as they're navigating through the streets. So we don't usually collect data right after the project's implemented. In some cases, we may do that if there's a justified reason from the project team to do so, but typically it's 3 months. So 3 months post-implementation. And for some projects, we may even do multiple evaluation periods implemented by the scope of the project.
Thank you for answer, but after 3 months, how long do you collecting data? If you make any decision and then you need a certain period of time, like 1 month, after 3 months, 1 month, 2 months, or 3 months, do you have any specific duration? And also after that, what kind of decision making happens?
Yeah, so in terms of the data collection time frame within the time period that we're making observation, general rule of thumb or standards from transportation data collection is about anywhere from a day to 3 days. So for like a parking study, for example, we can do occupancy counts for a 72-hour period. For vehicle volumes and speeds, that's usually just a 24, 48-hour periods, because from our experience of collecting data, a 72-hour period versus a 24-hour period for something like vehicle volumes and speeds, there's not much difference in the actual, I guess, like volumes collected per day. But generally speaking, it's about a week. So a week as in, a week as in either 1 day per week, 3 days per week, and usually weekday and weekends. And after we have collected the data, we will process it, clean it, make sure that it is usable. There are some instances where special events may occur, like a construction project or a special event that is a street closure that may skew the data a little bit, and we have to recollect it. But that we usually figure out pretty quickly if there recollection needs to happen. After it's all been analyzed and reported to the team, we then make decisions on, especially for the quick flow program, just design alterations and design revisions, anything that is or is not working.
Great, thank you, Member Kim. I would also say, just particularly on the Valencia project, that when the official bike lane is set to open, that if SFCTA can inform the SFCTA and our CAC members. So that way, I think there's a lot of growing interest around this, and there's already a lot of interest prior, right? And so, we just want to be informed about when the event, or when the actual bike lane is opening up to the public, and when to begin looking at evaluation being completed from there. Do we have any
Sure, we
other
can
comments,
definitely do
questions?
that.
Great, thank you, Kimberly. Do we have any other questions, comments, thoughts from members? Seeing none, this is an information item, so we can move on to item 7. Thank you for the presentation. We're going to move on to item 7, which is adopting a motion of support to accept the Transportation Capital Projects Delivery Study. This is an action item. Presenting on this item is going to be Yana Waldman, Assistant Deputy Director for Capital Projects, and she is here in person, or she virtual? Virtual, okay.
Hello, apologies. I am virtual, but I can be in the office for over there for questions if need be in a second. So yes. Let me share my screen quickly. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
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 Okay. Hi. Good evening. I'm Yana Waldman. I am the Assistant Deputy for Capital Projects at the TA, as noted. We are very pleased to be presenting this project, which we have been working on for a while. This was originally requested by Chair Mandelman and former Vice Chair Peskin. And I do want to note that the Deputy Director for Capital Projects is here with us as well, Carl Holmes. So you can see him there. Apologies. The purpose of this study was to identify lessons learned from our largest and most complex projects in the city, such that we could collectively improve business practices and project performance for those very challenging efforts. We note, as many projects should be, that all projects should be on time, on budget, and of high quality, and that because of this, we could promote San Francisco as a city of choice to do business with. This hasn't always been the case and it isn't necessarily the case now, and we want to strive towards changing that. Considering delivery of these very large, complex projects with high risk challenges, the study focused on how to uncover barriers to efficiency, process and policy improvement opportunities, and stakeholder communication and collaboration. It also strove to identify ways to improve our measurement of accountability. The TA staff could not have done this work alone. It was a large collective effort. So we want to thank everyone that was involved and helped us, from the Transportation Authority Board membership, the mayor's office, and many of the San Francisco departments, if not all of the large San Francisco departments who were involved in this work. They contributed on many different levels, from executive leadership meetings to working group meetings with management level staff, and circulating surveys to broader staff as well. So this very large group allowed us to have successful outcomes for the study. The process began with that executive roundtable discussion with leadership from all of the different departments, as well as the mayor's office and the Transportation Authority. And that was to identify priorities for the work. Following on this, the study team looked at case studies for projects of this nature that were experiencing challenges. After that, we convened workshops with a management working group made up of senior leadership from each department that was relevant to these large projects. We worked on surveys with that management working group and staff level contribution to those surveys. We also interviewed former leadership from the city that had worked on large complex projects, and I will get into the findings there in a few minutes. Together, this group formed draft recommendations, which were brought back to the executive leadership board following several months of ongoing work at the management level. To get into the details of some of those notes, we looked at we actually looked at a very long list of reports and studies that dove into challenges with large complex projects, but there's a few highlighted here that are of particular interest. The grand jury report for Van Ness BRT was one that came out right prior to our study and was one of the reasons for it. It had a lot of information on risk and challenges around utility investigation and relocation. Delivering exceptional projects is more of a positive story. This was how SFO has been able to pull in industry experts from the private sector, which has enabled projects to run smoothly and efficiently. The MTA audit on this project or this report has allowed us to look into lessons learned around stakeholder collaboration during planning. And then another positive piece of work coming out of the San Francisco Partnering Field Guide, which is an effort among many San Francisco departments to improve collaboration with the contractor community. So there were some positive lessons learned there. In the lower box here, you can see a few other reports that were also worth mentioning. This is the DTX peer review, which provides a framework for the portal project MOU structure, which we will discuss as a case study in a few minutes. And then surveys that were conducted by the San Francisco Collaborative Partnering Steering Committee, which provided eye-opening information on the construction climate in San Francisco. That's the same group that I noted in the above section. They have conducted numerous in-depth studies around how the contractor community is viewing large-scale project delivery in San Francisco, and some of the findings are showing that contractors are scared by the multi-department leadership in San Francisco, and they recognize the risk related to that and are marking projects up or bids up by on order of 10%, maybe more in some cases. And this is something that San Francisco should work to get away from that, that impression. After these different works, the takeaways were that the city should focus on timely hiring and retention of staff. Also, there needs to be improved coordination starting at the beginning of projects with stakeholders and the public, so that projects can be efficiently designed throughout their development process. Interdepartmental issue resolution was another big challenge. This is an area where currently on some large projects there is not an identified decision maker, and having that would speed along resolution. And then some other smaller issues, but very important, around timely processing of payments to our consultants and contractors, using up-to-date budgeting and financial structures, and doing risk management with the correct people in the room at the correct levels throughout a project. And a very important one here at the bottom of the list, third-party utility coordination, undocumented utilities. This can be a huge challenge. It was one of the biggest challenges for the Van Ness project, and is something that is certainly an issue for a lot of projects. As I noted earlier, the study team also conducted interviews with some previous city leadership, including Ed Harrington, a former city controller, and Rudy Nothenborg, the former city administrator who oversaw delivery of the Embarcadero waterfront project. They expressed the importance of strong city leadership and dedicated project offices for large projects, similar to that waterfront project that was dedicated after Loma Prieta. So we take these recommendations seriously. So the findings of the report, take all of that together, and we have 5 areas that are seen as key to moving this effort forward. Streamlining city department decision-making, as noted. This will require establishing clear roles for departments on large projects. Additional training for project managers and empowering those project managers to make the right decisions at the right levels. Improved and expanded access to cutting edge management tools and software. This is important, and it's important that all the departments use the same software so that it can be coordinated. Accelerated hiring of the staff to support the project managers, is also important to success. And then that collaborative risk identification and management so that there is not siloed discussion of projects in the different departments. The report has 5 recommendations. Recommendation 1 is to establish a capital projects management office, which we are referring to as the CPMO. This office is to stand up offices for those large projects, strengthening construction cost estimating so that project costs are understood up front and there are less surprises. Investing in right-of-way and utility investigation programs so that when the ground is dug into for a project, there are once again less surprises on what utilities are there and what will need to be relocated. Interdepartmental risk reviews and management, as it really ties to the others, but knowing what we're looking at up front doesn't necessarily make the risk go away, but it makes us better able to understand them and prepare for them and sometimes mitigate them, whether it be through changes to the project or sometimes just better insurance. And facilitated structured collaborative partnering. This was a favorite among many of the participants. Working with the partners makes everything go more smoothly. So you'll see a resounding plug for this across all the departments. We'll talk a little bit more about that CPMO concept. The idea here is to ensure that there are consistent standards for large complex projects, that 35, 65, and 95% design mean the same thing from department to department and from project to project so that everyone can be comparing apples to apples. And that the department would also enable more efficient decision-making on multi-agency projects that don't necessarily have clear ranking, and help with that streamlining of staff and consultants onto projects. You can see some details here. The idea is a CPMO would be a part to the city administrator's office and would pilot with some projects. Those projects are listed on the bottom here. I'll say that case study projects have been the portal DTX MOU, which I will talk about on our next slide in more detail. The SFO partnering model has also been a large contributor to our thoughts around what a high quality project organization can look like. And then we wanted to note Geary phase 1 here. This project wasn't as large as some of these other projects, but it did go well along with 19th Avenue and Taravel light rail. So the idea here is we can learn lessons even from some of the smaller projects on how to improve large project delivery. The potential projects we're looking at now are the portal former DTX project during the next phase and our project delivery to continue the good work that has been going on. Better Market Street, which is a large complex project that everyone knows is coming up, and of course other projects that meet similar criteria. The portal project former DTX MOU structure is shown here because it showcases one example of the type of structure the CPMO could establish for similar projects. It is 6-party with TJPA, the leader of the portal project, as one member, but also membership from other agencies and departments that are playing significant roles in the portal project delivery and leading related supporting projects, which you can see here across the bottom of the org structure. And this idea, it's working well right now, and it seems like something that could provide guidance to other projects of similar nature. The measurements of success for something like this would, of course, be projects being on time and on budget more often. Also, decreased time to approve changes, whether they be to finance or to design, just making projects move more quickly and smoothly. Cost estimating, which is something I touched on earlier, but those that could speed projects along as well. And the ability to manage those risks because the team members are collaborating to identify them up front. That is what we hope the CPMO can be. And with that, I would love to take questions.
Great, thank you, Yana. We're gonna open it up to public comment in person. Mr. Mason.
Thank you. My comment, 2 minutes, okay. The report, when I read this, fails to mention anything about project management certification of the project managers, or is it going to be a project management professional designation? Who are the people that are going to be running this thing? Are they going to be professional project managers? Because you can get a certificate, for $3,000–4,000 online, but unless you're exposed to it, you're going to be running into problems. We're not going with an inspector general overseeing this. The Valley Transportation Authority on all their major projects has an inspector general that they hire. That's an accountancy firm, and they provide quarterly updates as to the projects as they're proceeding. So, are we going to be getting into Gantt charts and earned value, critical path, work breakdown structures? Is that what's going to happen? I hope it does to some degree, because if you don't do that, all of this is eyewash to me. I'm really disappointed that we didn't get into the nitty gritty of what is really going to happen in the project management. You've got all these executives running around, but are they qualified to make decisions on the events that are going to be presented to them? I think there should be, something about project management certification or professionalism with the project managers. And whether BART has an inspector general, we go away from it. We had the Central Subway, and they go in 5 years later asking for contract change orders that should have been done in a timely manner, and they weren't done. So that's where an inspector general would say, hey, you got to do this and do it in a timely manner. And my time is up now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mason. Do we have virtual public comment?
Yes, checking for public comment. Roland, go ahead. Your 2 minutes begins now. Maybe not. Okay, Roland, are you there? Okay, I think not. There is no further virtual public comment.
Great, thank you. Let's open up to members from the CAC. I see member Ortega, then member Kim, then member Levine.
Hi, yes, thank you. I have a few questions in regards to this, and as someone that has done capital project work and requesting before, one of the key questions that I have and that I see was touched on but not explained fully, and I'd like this more. you talk a lot about working on your estimation and your budgeting and how San Francisco has a reputation of not being particularly friendly to contractors. One of the questions that I like to ask is, did you actually look at the bidding process during this review and this study? My work is all about working with vendors. And one of the big things that I have found is that if your RFQ is not up to snuff or accurate enough, or any of like a million things that could come up, you're not going to get good bids and you're not going to get good estimations. I didn't see anything in this presentation regarding how the RFQs are done, what information is given. I think that, especially with the first step being mentioned on the reputation of the contractors, have we actually talked to the contractors on how a bid process for them would be better, so that we can ensure that we have the accuracy and the timing? It is a two-way street. And I just want to know if that was even a thought or if that occurred. In addition, I would also just like to understand the level of detail that was gone into this survey. It seems very broad, and I think that that is a great first step. But at some point, it is important to make sure that all of the details get accounted for. The devil is in the details with capital projects. And so, for instance, what is the overall contingency? Is that also going to be reflected in the updated budget and estimations? Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Member Ortega.
I'd be happy to answer that. I will say that we did discuss project delivery, and I'm sorry that the presentation doesn't get into it as much, but it was an active part of our work, what project delivery methods lead to some of these challenges, and low bid is one of the concerns. It leads to contractors looking at RFPs, as you mentioned, and seeing where they can identify spots to add change orders later on. So part of doing better cost estimating up front is really saying, what should this process be? What should this project cost? So if you get a low bid, you know that it is a low bid. You know that it is not matching the engineer's estimate, or it, within some realm of reason, a few percent. So that is one of the reasons why estimating is called out is so important, is because the low bid environment is a challenge. Another thing you asked about is if we talked to contractors. As part of this study, explicitly, there was not a section that directly talked to contractors, but the San Francisco partnering group that I mentioned, several studies came from, directly works with contractors, conducts surveys. The contractor community is members of that group. And so they provide their feedback, as you suggested, directly into the process. So that we are hearing from contractors on what can make it better for them. And some of these recommendations are percolated up from that. They too want the better decision making, so things go faster. One of the ideas around faster processing of invoices is because contractors are concerned about how long invoices sit, how long costs sit on their books. So this study has specifically tried to think about contractors and what we can do to all work together. When we say partnering, we're not saying just city departments, we're saying city departments and the contractors. And maybe this is a good time to note, like, we recently conducted a partnering session for one of our projects, which included the contractors, the CM team, the owners, us, and membership from almost all of the city departments that were going to be working on the project. And that discussion was robust. It's the first of many on that specific project, but that type of partnership, I think, speaks to what you're saying. It's to work with the contractors to understand how they can be more included in the process. Did that answer some of your questions?
Yes, it did. Thank you. I'll pass this on to member Kim now.
If I may add, sure,
Sure, I
Or
want to make sure
I can
that
hold off. I can hold off until,
Yeah, maybe just a brief response, but I think also if you want to connect with member Ortega offline, we could also do that as well too.
Yes, I would be happy to continue discussing further details on this offline.
We would love that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that'd be great. Thank you.
excellent.
Thank you, member Ortega. Member Kim?
Thank you, chairs. I have a question, the CPMO, who's the CPMO staff? Is from the MTA or Public Works? From like, city agencies or independent, organization from the city agencies?
So the current draft structure of what the CPMO would look like is it would be dedicated staff that would sit under the city administrator. It would be a subgroup to the city administrator's office, and there would be dedicated staff. And then there would also be support from the city departments. So that would be the CPMO office. They would also stand up project offices for whatever large scale project. And that would also include dedicated staff and department representation that are specialists in that industry. I know there were some questions around training and qualifications, so they would be qualified by city standards.
Yeah, thank you, friends. And then we have one example right now, Parabel Street. There's replacement street rail. So, but it's really right now ugly. And then last week, the one of the president of Parabel Merchant Association attended a meeting to Gary. At the time, we have a meeting with Jeff Tomlin, and he came to ask, the big issue, because those construction delayed and then not organized well. So the some certain street they have to close 4 days for the business. Only 4. So he said something like that. One part they digging up, but PG&E is not ready. And then PG&E is ready, Public Works not ready, and everybody ready. One department out of budget. So they have to wait until finish the issue. So that's why he came to ask Jeff Tomlin, but Jeff Tomlin says, "Oh, this is out of my hand, my control, because it's not his under control." So we experience those things still. Right now, you mentioned about inter-department things, but it's a big project, a lot of department involved in, but who's gonna take accountability for this? This is really confusing, and then we know the problem, but so far, we don't know how to solve these issues. So, and also the study sample. Do you get sample like from other city or even other state and other country? We need some best practice, like subway, a central subway. It took more than 10 years, but we see other countries they finish half of the time, less than half of the money. So if we study, and then we have to study best practice, not only limited to San Francisco. We have to study really a good standard or a best practice even in the world.
Thank you for those comments. I think we wholeheartedly agree with everything you just said. The long list of studies we reviewed is in the I know it wasn't in the presentation, but it's in the back of the report, and it does include some review of projects outside of the region and outside of the country, and what those best practices are projects do go much faster in other areas. One of the leading challenges in the Bay Area is all of the different departments, and this isn't just San Francisco, it's throughout places where there's many different departments trying to do similar things. And that's why one of the recommendations is to have an efficient decision-making process, so that when there is a decision that needs to be made, there's a clear person or group that can make that call. So I think one of the things that is hopefully coming out of this work is that we want to work on with the city departments and the city administrator's office, continue to work on rolling this out and having implementation of the recommendations.
Great, thank you. Member Levine?
Thank you. I just want to touch on a little bit of a follow-up on Member Kim's comments. Besides the direct focus on projects, there's often substantial collateral damage. For example, the impacts on existing small businesses along the projects. And this seems to be a consistent problem particularly with the large projects, long-lasting projects. Has this been addressed at all in the study?
It has been brought up, and this actually got brought up by a number of our board members, that it is a huge challenge for projects. And what we are proposing to do as part of this work, or what this is captured under, is that stakeholder coordination, doing improved stakeholder coordination during the planning phase to make sure the project can be planned in the best way possible to mitigate those challenges for some businesses in the project vicinity. And then ongoing communication with the stakeholders, with residents, so that everyone knows when something's happening. I think one of you mentioned earlier that it can be confusing, and one of the ways to reduce that confusion is to have better communication. So that is why it is one of our leading recommendations of what needs to be happening on a project. So anything that we are recommending, we hope to be implementing into reality in the coming year.
Just as a follow-up, it seems as though the issue of impacts on small business is not only during the project, but in follow-up after the projects are completed. And I just wonder and would like to see something in the study that would provide for support for small businesses for a period substantially after the projects are completed. Thank you.
Okay, we'll note that and take that back for discussion.
Thank you, Member Levine. Seeing no other members, I'm going to open it up really quickly for public comment for Roland. He was unable to make comment earlier.
Okay, I'm gonna open it up to Roland. You can make your comment now. Roland, you can unmute yourself. Your 2 minutes starts now. Roland?
Thank you. I'm unable to unmute myself. I'm not allowed. You've got to send me the unmute for me to be able to unmute myself. I got a couple of quick comments. Somebody mentioned change orders. If you want to know what can possibly go wrong, go and look at tomorrow morning High-Speed Rail Authority board meeting, the budget, and you will see a construction package known as CP1, package number 1, which was a $1 billion package, and so far has accumulated $5 billion in change orders. That's what can possibly go wrong. The only comment I've got is about slide 13 at the bottom, when you show all the related projects. You are missing the crossing across the bay. link 21. That is a TJPA legal mandate that's codified in Senate Bill 916, which is Regional Measure 2. Whatever they do, they got to be able to go across the pay. There's no way out right now. The only way they're going to make it is if they take down half a dozen buildings, including the entire Lincoln Center. Nobody is looking at this. That has to be addressed as a matter of urgency before we proceed with this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Roland.
Great, thank you. So this is an action item, so we need to make a decision on that. Do we have a motion?
Just as a question, what in fact are we are we voting?
Yeah, I don't understand what I'm voting.
We are voting to accept the report as it is.
Do we have access to this report in some way?
Yes, so there are copies of the full report over there, which I can grab you one. It's also been posted to our website
okay,
this morning, afternoon.
Yeah, like, okay.
Yeah. But we do still need a motion now. Unfortunately, I don't think we have time for Mr. Levine to go through the whole report.
He's a really good speaker.
Do we have a motion?
I just had a quick question. Can this report have amendments added on later? That actually is just a question. I don't know.
Council.
I'd like if Maria, you could weigh in here, please.
Sure thing. Can you hear me, Elijah? Yep, awesome. So yeah, let me just clarify, it's a little bit different than the normal action that you see. So accepting the report is pretty much like saying, thank you very much, the report is now done. Versus in action that more explicitly says go forth with the recommendations. In terms of making amendments to Member Ortega's question, the CAC could make some suggestions now, or because the board does not have its final action until September 12th, you could email us or provide us input that the team could consider before it goes to board. That said, the board did vote unanimously to accept the report at its meeting yesterday.
And the other board action with that vote was to authorize our executive director Tilly Chang to publish this report, this draft report, so that it can be made public, but also sent to all of the relevant stakeholders that put effort into this. So as Maria said, with the second reading in September, it could be that there's feedback on some minor adjustments, but we wanted to still advance this report because the work is completed, but actually implementing it, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And I would expect that with the implementation of this CPMO, there always will be refinements for continuous improvements.
And then in terms of like those continuous improvements, Carl, do we have like a set timeline of like when we reevaluate and the updates that need to like be made or revisions made to particularly the CPMO?
At this point, I would refer or defer that to the city administrator's office once they are at the point of starting that process. But from the perspective of our report and our recommendations, I believe we're ready to hand that off and then also be supportive in the implementation of it. But there would need to be time, I think, to be able to evaluate what is working, what's not working, to be able to say how to measure and say what is part of that continuous improvement. But the important thing for today is allowing for this report to be published so that the real work, not that the work that happened before wasn't real, but actually implementing these recommendations. And the city administrator's office may have other recommendations as they proceed, but we were charged with providing our recommendations from all the effort we did up to this point.
Just one final comment. Will we have an opportunity at some time in the future for you to come back to us and give us an update?
Absolutely. We will, I think we'll come back for an update. I don't know if we can commit to a timeline because we don't know when the city administrator's office's timeline will be, but we will come back likely in the next year to report. And you can, you can check in with us. And I do think that if you have near-term comments, to Maria's point, we can make probably slight adjustments if they're small, but as the board may make comments too. So
the short answer is yes. You have the authority to ask us to provide an update on anything.
Yes, it'd be great if you could commit to that. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think I would agree as well. Yeah. And I think if you do have amendments, Member Ortega, that you want to send over, feel free to copy us, right? And so I think we'd be interested in seeing that prior.
Yeah, give me a weekend. It's been a
Take your
week.
time. Yeah.
Sorry.
We got time till September 12th, right? So.
well-
Great. So do we have any motion? Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, if you do have substantial changes, that if they could come a week ahead of September 12th so that we can get them into our package. As you know.
I'll try to get it to you a lot sooner. I'm not sure how substantial they'll be. I think I'm just gonna have a lot more questions.
Thank you.
We welcome your feedback.
Yes, they are very welcome.
Great, thank you. And do we have a motion?
I'll move approval of the draft report.
Great. Do we have a second?
Second.
Great. Can we take the same house, same call?
We actually cannot because Mariko has joined us, so we have to go from the top, but
Okay.
we are very happy she joined us.
Yes, welcome.
So could you remind me who motioned and seconded?
And Member Daniel second.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion from Member Levine, a second from Member Daniels on item 7. Member Barr is absent. Member Chen.
Chen, I.
Chen, I. Member Daniels.
Daniel, I.
Daniels, I. Member Davidson.
Davidson, I.
Davidson, I. Member Kim.
Epstein,
Kim abstain. Member Levine.
Levine, aye.
Levine, I. Member Ortega.
Ortega, I.
Ortega, I. Members Chair Ortiz.
Abstain.
Ortiz abstain. Member Roselle absent and Vice Chair Siegel absent. With 2 people abstaining, we only have 5 ayes, so the report is not accepted.
Sorry, Elijah, it just means the motion fails.
Motion fails. Apologies, this is my
Needs
first.
Six votes to either approve or disapprove something.
Oh, well, the motion fails.
So can we call maybe some with the motion right now, and I know that there's some recommendations that are on the table particularly. Could we call another meeting prior, or what would be the best approach on this? Do we need to take another vote on the item? I guess what would be our options?
So remember, so Chair Ortiz, this is Maria Lombardo. You could see if there's someone else wants to make a motion and see if the outcome is different. You could choose not to act on it, in which case it will just go forward to the board. Or I suppose since the CAC is meeting September 6th, we could agendize the report at the same time. I do also want to clarify one thing Carl Holmes said, if it wasn't clear, is that with our report, we are making these recommendations, that one of which is having the CAO office set up this project oversight office. We don't oversee that agency. That's really under the mayor's direction. So that's what Carl was getting at, and Yana, that we are putting our report out there and our thoughts and are working with the mayor's office and the CAO office and hoping that they implement this. But I just want to be clear that it's our board is not, with a board approval doesn't mean this will happen, but we are hoping it will. And those are kind of in motion on the side already. But hopefully I clarified your options to Ortiz for the motions.
So if members are open to it, maybe we agendize this for September 6th. Would that work? Okay. I'm just doing a straw poll.
So September 6th, it could be the agenda dies, and then those will include Ortega's the request.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Harry, member Kim, could you say that one more time? I couldn't hear what you said.
My question was if we re-agendize these items on September, those the September agenda include member Ortega's request or amendment.
If we were to do that, we could, and Carl, please jump in. We would bring back a list of any comments received or feedback we have received from parties. We aren't committing that there would be changes necessarily because it depends on what the feedback is. And right, so I'll just leave it there.
I will also ask for Elijah's help on making sure everyone is CC'd on any feedback that I give, so that way it is not a surprise on the September 6th meeting.
And just for clarification's sake, particularly for the agenda to go out for the September 6th meeting, when will those comments need to be in by from member Ortega?
Yeah, please let me know.
But
Is it 5 days out?
I really like 2 weeks before the meeting, I would say at a minimum, so that we have time to look at earlier if better, member Ortega and others, that we have time to review them and consult with others if we need to. The packet gets out, as you know, about a week to 5 days ahead of time.
Yeah, I think just in that case, Maria, can I get Iana's email? Can I get email? There's a couple of things I'd like to ask.
Absolutely.
Well.
You can just also email Elijah and he'll connect you with Yana and Carl.
Thanks.
Great. So August 23rd is what I'm looking at in terms of just as a deadline.
Thanks.
Great. So motion fails. We're going to move on to item 8. We are just continuing to set records for long meetings, even with short agendas. So I do apologize. But we're going to have a state and federal legislation update. I'm going to ask members to keep their questions for one question, please, just so we can make sure that we're trying to get out of here on time. With that being said, item 8, which is a state and federal legislation update, presenting as a new Amber Craft, public policy manager in person. Thank you for being here.
Great, yeah, hello everyone, this is my first meeting back post-pandemic, so it's good to see all of you in person. Typically this is on the consent agenda, but I think decided to present today and give you a chance to give me a chance to answer a couple other questions that I understand have come up in prior meetings. So first, just going over what was in the staff memo. Yesterday, our board took a support position on Senate Bill 532, that's Senator Wiener's bill that would increase tolls by $1.50 on the 7 state-owned Bay Area bridges, so all the bridges except for the Golden Gate Bridge. It would be in effect for 5 years, starting on January 1st, 2024. So the bill passed out of the Assembly Transportation Committee on July 6th and is currently in the Assembly Appropriations Committee. So it would raise $180 million a year, be distributed by the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. 90% of that would be to maintain service or also to implement improvements that advance safety, security, cleanliness. And then 10% would be available or up to 10% available for other like service improvements and things like that. The methodology to determine which transit operator gets what is still TBD, but there is a provision in the bill that the funding should be prioritized for operators serving the greatest number of people. So that probably hopefully bodes well for San Francisco's operators. So the bill also requires the development of an equity program to mitigate the impact of the toll on low-income drivers. And I know there's been a lot of discussion about what those options could be. It also recently was amended to kind of codify some reductions that the Metropolitan Transportation Commission recently approved on lowering fine and violation rates for all drivers to reduce the burden, especially on those lower income. So the bill faces a pretty challenging path since it requires a 2/3 vote. It has not seen support across the board from even Bay Area legislators. So it'll be a tough road, but it'll be interesting to watch. I'm glad that we were able to weigh in because really seeing it as a bridge solution between the help that the state just gave us and then looking at a regional revenue measure for transportation in 2026. So that was a recommendation for support to our board. The two questions that I also was told were asked before, I wanted to just briefly touch on. The first is what happens if the state transit funding in the budget doesn't cover the transit shortfall? So I think this happened since your last meeting, but at a very, very high level, the state budget restored $4 billion of transit capital funding and made it available for use on operations. And it also provided a new 1.1 billion that could also be flexed for operations, all being distributed to the regions to distribute them to the transit operators and decide what to do with it. That is some, but it is a small step in the right direction toward a permanent solution. We spoke with SFCTA and they said that the budget agreement avoids service cuts this calendar year. Looking at next year, it's going to help, but they won't be able to add service beyond existing levels. And they'll likely need to implement additional measures such as the parking meter hours changes that have been discussed recently in order to even maintain the level of service. So the state budget is kind of a down payment, allowing MTA to have a little bit more time to find additional ways to address the fiscal cliff, be it through the bridge toll increase or the 2026 revenue measure or other ways. So, and then the second question was around privacy protections within Assembly Bill 645, which is the freedom and speed safety camera legislation that is now all the way through the Assembly in Senate appropriations. So it's very close to making it to the governor's office, which we're very excited about. But there has been a lot of negotiations over the privacy provisions. I know it's been a big concern this year and the times previously it's been introduced. This year, the bill now includes a requirement of working with a range of equity and privacy groups in the development of the program. It requires photographic evidence to be confidential and only shared when required by law. It prohibits the use of facial recognition technology and requires cameras to be angled such that to the degree possible, they only are capturing the violation and not identifying other drivers or pedestrians. And then it requires that all of the visual evidence be destroyed promptly, be it if a few days if they don't see a violation, and then shortly following when things are resolved when a violation occurs. So hopefully that gives you the information that you were looking for. There's also more detail on the privacy protection components of the AB 645 in the packet. So happy to answer any questions.
Great, Member Levine.
Yes, just on SB 532, the toll bridge.
Yes.
And am I understanding this right about the toll violations, that it would actually be less expensive to pay the violation than it would the toll?
No, so the violation rates are in addition to the toll. So you owe the toll and then you owe, there's a violation for the first one and then the penalties start to build up if you continue to not pay. Yeah, but were significantly higher, and recently MTC acted to significantly reduce them for equity concerns, and this would just codify the rates that they currently are at, the low rates. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Seeing no other questions, I just had a quick question, particularly on AB 825, particularly from member Isaac Bryan. And I was curious because I know obviously the position right now for the CTA is opposed unless amendment, and I've amended. And I was just curious, particularly given the concerns around why this bill is being put up into place, what the concerns are from the CTA about opposing it thus far.
So yeah, we haven't opposed unless amended, and this is coming from, I think the author has, I think is from it's from Southern California, has concerns that if a bicyclist doesn't feel safe on a roadway, and there isn't a facility provided, then they should be allowed to use the sidewalk. And I think the typology of the streetscape is obviously different across the state. And so our concern is that, we have much smaller sidewalks, we have a lot more pedestrian activity. Our roads are generally more controlled in most cases. There's stop signs and stoplights, so speeds in a lot of cases aren't as high as you might see in more suburban environments. And I think our concern is looking at the safety of pedestrians, and in particular people with mobility challenges that use the sidewalks. And so I think that's our concern mainly, is for the safety of those using the sidewalk.
Yeah, because I know Assemblymember Bryan is now like majority whip, right? And so I think also, given his kind of work, particularly on racial justice, particularly about not having, cops interacting with folks, particularly riding bikes, right? I think that was also a concern as well too. So I guess like particularly what would be the CTA's kind of like position, like friendly amendments that would make it being removed from opposing to supporting?
I think what we have discussed would be, there was, and I'm forgetting the number of the bill last year that was successful that essentially decriminalized jaywalking. So an approach like that, where if the main focus is enforcement activities, and not wanting that to be not using biking on sidewalks to be an excuse for other enforcement activities, right? Then you could still have it be still let local jurisdictions have the ability to prohibit bikes on sidewalks, but then just make it unenforceable. And that sounds strange, but it would still allow the city to say, please don't, you're not supposed to be on the sidewalks. But then also limit its ability to be used for disproportionate enforcement.
Yeah, I think it's just a kind of a very nuanced discussion, given that, we're seeing a lot of just criminalized activity, particularly around skateboards and things like that as well. And so looking at kind of like skateboarding, like enforcement, particularly now bike enforcement as well too, I do worry about the kind of like racial justice lens, particularly when it comes to enforcement on this. So yeah, then maybe we can talk offline.
Yeah, open to any suggestions, because I think it's weighing safety and looking at the statistics about that is important too.
Yeah, like one form, like, the transit infrastructure safety, right, of pedestrian safety, and then also at the same time, like interactions with police, right? And so multiple levels of safety that we have to take into consideration. Do we have any other questions, comments from members? Public comment? Oh, member Kim, go ahead. And I do apologize, I was supposed to take public comment first, but go ahead, member Kim.
Yeah, those future equity measure, it says MTC study, design and implement. So when is the timeline we can get some kind of visible how to get those equity measures?
Well, that would be if the bridge toll is the bill is approved to increase the bridge toll. I think the legislature has 2 years to basically tell MTC what they need to do. I do expect, so I would guess like 2 years would probably be the extent, or the furthest extent that they would have to implement it. I would hope that it would happen a lot quicker than that, but I think we'll know more once the final bill language is in place and we get a clear sense of what they're asking and requiring, and then hopefully the region will be able to move as quickly as possible.
So this one, effective date is January 1st, 2024. So there's no equity measure at that time, but after 2 years, within 2 years, develop, and then, the low income drivers expect to get some benefits, right?
Yes, I think that would be where the equity measures would be in place.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Member Kim. Member Davison.
Only just express my support for the speed camera.
Great, thank you. Do we have public comment? Any person? Mr. Mason?
Unfortunately, I was not able to hear any comments because no one is up close and personal with your microphones. May I please request that you get up close and personal with your microphone so I can hear back here. Regarding the toll, I don't see any improvement with BART. BART continues to run 10-car trains that are basically almost empty. And if I saw maybe 6 or 7 car trains running, I might be inclined to it. You see the shuttle and the subway here from Muni. To me, from my observations, it's a waste of money with the service, and they just need to improve operation with the other lines in the subway. Bicycles on the sidewalks, absolutely not. We've got so many micro mobility vehicles between scooters, skateboards, and bicycles. You get run down. There's absolutely nothing. I'm collecting photos of my experiences with these micro mobility on the sidewalks, and I am just appalled, and I'll be forwarding those to you. The 2/3 vote, to me, that means that you've got a project that you can't convince people of, that's getting in. You got Spur and everybody else that's wanting to get the projects done, but you can't justify it with a 2/3 vote because people don't believe in it necessarily. And I believe that there should be a 2/3 vote for any type of increased taxation, because this just lessens the threshold for it. So those are my general comments, and please, would you get up close and personal with the microphone so I can hear in the back, because the projection is going across the way. I'm in the back here and I can't hear. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Mason. We'll be sure to be using the microphone. I would also say, particularly on, I would also definitely echo your remarks around not having scooters on sidewalks, right? I think we've had some discussions, particularly about having, making sure that, scooters are not riding on the sidewalks just because they can actually reach speeds much faster than bikes, right? So definitely keeping that in mind as well. That being said, do we have any other virtual public comment?
Yes, checking for public comments. We have a public comment from Roland. I am unmuting you now. And go ahead, Roland, your 2 minutes starts now.
Thank you. That worked great. Thank you so much. So I have a quick comment about Senate Bill 532. I think Muni should really consider pay evasion as an issue before they go around asking money from other people who, quite frankly, have got nothing to do with the current situation. I took the Central Subway And I basically, I was the only person in the train that tagged in. Nobody else does. And last week I took the 25 to Treasure Island. That bus was absolutely packed. I mean, it was standing room only. I was lucky to have a seat. And they were actually talking about it on the bus because they knew actually I was wearing a suit, so they were wondering what I was doing on that bus. And they were talking among themselves and saying that they wouldn't get away with this on board because on board they had bar police that would basically take care of a fair enforcement. And some of them knew about Clipper Start. And I think that's where Muni really has to start addressing this issue, is to make everybody pay. And then for those, of lower means who cannot afford it for one reason or another, put them on, on all the programs that we spent the last few years establishing so that they can use the system. But that to me is the priority, not going around taking money away from people who are trying to cross bridges or auto park just to get to and from work downtown. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Roland. I see no further public comment virtually. Thank you.
Great, this is an information item, so we can move on to item 9, which is going to be the Community Advisory Committee Ethics Training. And we're all looking forward to this. So I think we have Amber Mulkey, for item 9.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Ortiz and committee members. Yes, Amber Maltby with the law firm at Nossaman, and I will go ahead and share my screen. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So thank you for having me here this evening to provide your ethics training. Tonight, we are going to be covering two overviews of two topics, one, conflicts of interest, and then a brief primer on open meeting and Brown Act requirements. So the goals for this evening are threefold. One, we want to help you be able to spot when there might be a conflict issue and be able to identify when you should be asking questions. Second, to help you avoid both the actual or the appearance of a conflict of interest. And then finally, provide you an overview with the process for what to do in the event that you should conclude that there might be a conflict of interest. So going back a little bit, let's talk about why you're even here. The main law in California that governs government ethics is called the Political Reform Act. It is administered by a state agency called the Fair Political Practices Commission. Public officials are required to take an ethics training every other year. Public officials are also required to file a statement of economic interest or Form 700 that discloses that public officials' financial interests. The Citizens Advisory Committee is unique in that, or I'm sorry, Community Advisory Committee is unique in that because it is an advisory body. The governing body, that would be the members here tonight, are not considered public officials subject to these same restrictions. However, because of your public position, you are considered a steward of the public trust. And so there's a combination of ethical principles in addition to some laws we'll talk about later that do apply to you. And the most important takeaway that I would like to convey for you all tonight is that the advisory committee members could become public officials in certain circumstances. And so we will call this a trap for the unwary. A public official includes salaried or unsalaried members of boards that have decision-making authority. And what that means is that your board can make a final government decision, you may compel a government decision, or you make substantive recommendations that over time are approved without significant amendment or modification by another public official or government agency. So in other words, the way that the FPPC, the Fair Political Practices Commission, has described it is that if over time recommendations by an advisory committee are essentially rubber stamped, and that's the key word here, by the government agency, so in this case, it would be the Transportation Authority, then a new analysis should be done to determine whether the members have become public officials. And if the members become public officials, then the conflict of interest rules that we'll be talking about next will not just be guiding principles, but will be legally applicable to the members of the advisory committee. So a quick overview of ethical principles. There are two buckets that intertwine. One is your ethical obligations, and then the other are legal obligations. So particularly in your position as again, stewards of the public trust, the two ways to think about your obligations are what are you ethically obligated to do and what does the law require you to do. But the law is really a floor, meaning sometimes the law may permit a certain course of action, but ethical principles should shy the public official away from maybe taking that particular course of action. So as individuals who are in a position of public trust, it is imperative that the decisions that you're making in that position are guided by what is best for the agency, what is best for the constituents of that agency, of the district that you represent, and that those decisions are made free from personal biases, whether those be individual biases or driven by financial interests, driven by familial relationships or professional friendships outside of your public position. You always need to have first and foremost in mind what's in the best interest of the agency. And you also want to make sure that you are being a careful steward of public dollars as well. So what exactly is a conflict of interest? This is a term that is both, it is both a term of art, it is also a legal term as well. You can have a non-legal conflict of interest that is driven just by a competing interest, meaning an interest that competes with your official obligations. You can also have a legal conflict of interest if you were to become a public official, if you are voting on a matter in which you have a financial interest, which is what we'll be focusing on with the next few slides. Excuse me. So under the Political Reform Act, again, that's the main body of law that governs public officials and their ethical duties. There's a conflict of interest when you have a governmental decision and the public official has a financial interest, and that governmental decision will have a reasonably foreseeable material financial effect on the public official's financial interests. In that case, the official is required to disclose their disqualifying interest and to recuse themselves from participating in that vote or that decision. So there are a couple of pieces that have to be present. The financial impact on your financial interest, you the public official, it must be reasonably foreseeable and distinguishable from the impact on the public generally. Additionally, the financial impact or effect must be significant enough to be considered material. So in other words, a public official may identify that they have a financial interest that a vote that they're making or casting could impact. However, the actual financial effect on their financial interest is so insignificant that the law has said it's fine. You don't have to recuse yourself. You can participate in that matter. But that that is where the question between the law and ethical principles come in. It very well could be that legally a public official is allowed to participate, but there could be a whole variety of reasons why they feel, just as a matter of propriety, it would be better for them to sit out of a particular vote. So there are some conflicts that are incredibly obvious. There was a case in Los Angeles just a few years ago where a member of the LA City Council was caught having accepted bags of tens of thousands of dollars of cash in a casino bathroom from developers or business interests that had interests in front of the Los Angeles City Council. And so he was indicted and spent some time in prison. That's an egregious and very obvious conflict of interest. But your typical conflict of interest is going to be a little bit harder to identify. And so it's important to understand what the Political Reform Act identifies as a financial interest that you should be looking at to determine whether or not you can participate in a vote. So there are 5 financial interests within the Political Reform Act that public officials have to be aware of and disclose on their Form 700, the Statement of Economic Interest that I mentioned at the top of the training. The first one is a business entity. So this might be either a business entity that the public official has an investment in of $2,000 or more. This can be something like stock. It can also be a business position, even if no income is being derived. So if you're a member of an LLC or you own a corporation, but it hasn't been operating for any amount of time, those would still be considered financial interests. Real property is also a financial interest, and the real property has to be located within the jurisdiction or within 2 miles of the jurisdiction. And a month-to-month lease does not count as real property. Income, so your public official source of income, not their government agency income, private income that they receive outside of their government job will be a financial interest. So typically a private employer, but it could be income from consulting contracts and things of that nature. Additionally, the source of the gifts is a financial interest, and if the gifts aggregate to $590 or more in the previous 12 months from a single source, they will be a financial interest to the public official. And then finally, our personal finances. So these are your assets, your liabilities, those of your immediate family. So again, once you've identified that you have a financial interest and that in your position, in your voting position, you'll be making a decision that could impact your financial interest, the next step in the analysis to determine whether or not it's necessary to recuse yourself is to determine whether or not the financial impact on that financial interest is going to be material. So for all 5 of those interests that I just laid out for you, each one has a different materiality standard. Just for example, I included here only the materiality standard that you would use if a vote would have an impact on your real property. So here you'll see that the standard is looking at the relationship between where your real property is and where the location of the subject of your decision is. And if your real property is within 500 feet of the location of the subject of your decision, then the decision is considered material, and you would be, if you are a public official, recusing yourself from that decision. If the real property is between 500 and 1,000 feet, then you're actually looking at a bit more granular detail to see whether or not the decision is going to have an impact essentially on the value of the parcel, looking at different things like, will the traffic levels be altered? What will the impact be on the property's highest and best use, things of that nature. So you're looking a little bit more at the total circumstances and not just the amount away the property is from the subject. And then finally, for real property, if it is more than 1,000 feet away from the location of the decision subject, then it's deemed to be not material, although there could be clear and convincing evidence that it is material, but that would be on a case-by-case basis. And again, I'm including just for example the materiality standard for real property. For the other four interests that were identified, business position, in source of income, for example, you'd be looking at other things. So for example, will the decision impact the annual revenue or increase the annual expenses, things of that nature. So it becomes very granular. So I thought we could do just a couple of hypos, do a little gut check with the members. So I wanted to see if you all think that in either of these situations, Committee Member Jones might have a conflict, whether it be legal or maybe just in principle. So Committee Member Jones routinely works as a consultant to transportation consulting firms for specific projects. If Jones's recommended firm, or I guess if the advisory committee's recommended firm is selected by the Transportation Authority, Jones knows it is likely that he will be hired to assist with that project. In the second alternative, there's a firm that has offered to pay Jones a finder's fee if the Transportation Authority selects it. So show of hands, do we think that Committee Member Jones can or should be participating in votes involving these hypothetical firms? That's a thumbs down. I like it. Yeah, absolutely. These are both scenarios where Committee Member Jones would be advised to not participate in these votes, even if we were to go through the whole materiality standard analysis I was just walking you through. These are ones where it's clear that there's a significant personal financial interest in these decisions. So this is one where it would be recommended to not participate in the vote. So if you believe that you have a potential conflict that you have identified, the following procedure is recommended. One, notify Elisha Saunders at least 24 hours prior to the relevant vote. After the item is read, state that you will be recusing yourself from the discussion and from the vote due to a conflict of interest. You can also disclose what you believe your financial interest to be. Do not participate in the agenda item discussion. And if you will recuse yourself from participating in the vote, state abstain when the vote is called. And if you all don't have it, the PowerPoint also includes Elijah's contact information, so you can get a hold of him if you've identified a potential conflict. So on a related ethics topic, I noted that the source of gifts can become a financial interest if you're a public official. There's also a gift limit for public officials. It's also $590 per calendar year, is the most that a public official may accept from a single source in the aggregate in a calendar year. So advisory committee members are not subject explicitly to a gift limit. However, it is recommended, and it is certainly a best practice to avoid accepting gifts from persons or entities that are doing business, and especially that are seeking business from the Transportation Authority. It's also recommended that for lavish meals that you pay for your share of those meals. If the person that you're sharing a meal with, again, is seeking business from the Transportation Authority. There's not really that same concern if the giver of the gift is wholly unrelated to your role on the advisory committee. So things like wedding gifts, personal friendships that you knew before you were on the committee, those types of gifts, you don't have to have the same type of concern with. Unless, of course, the gift giver becomes a contractor to the Transportation Authority, then you may want to reevaluate whether or not you should accept gifts from that person. So we'll switch gears now and move over to this is just a brief primer on the Brown Act, which again is the open meetings law that members of the committee are subject to, and just a few reminders about what the requirements are, what a meeting is not. So the basic rule is that any meeting must be open to the public. It must be properly agendized. Deliberations on agenda items have to take place at the public meeting. All of this is meant to facilitate the public's ability to know what the agency is up to, how it is reaching its decisions, but also so that the public can meaningfully participate and offer its own opinion in that process. One sort of trap for the unwary is that a meeting does not just mean the physical meeting as the committee members are doing right now. It's not just a physical meeting. A meeting is a quorum of the legislative body, which can be also done over email. So if a majority of members communicate with each other over a matter that's before the agency's jurisdiction, then that has created a meeting over email. Same thing with the conference call. So it's important to be mindful that if you're interacting with other members, that you're limiting it to less than a majority. So one-on-one meetings are fine. You do have to be careful that you're not facilitating a meeting by developing consensus among different members by having multiple one-on-one conversations. So just a couple of things to be mindful of, particularly being careful when you hit reply all on an email and all of the members are on that email. If a conversation gets going, it can very quickly inadvertently become a meeting, that would not be agendized in public and therefore a potential Brown Act violation. There are ways in which members can convene and it won't be a meeting that's subject to the Brown Act requirements, including attendance at things like educational conferences, purely social or ceremonial gatherings. Although you all, if a majority of members do go on a social outing, there's some care that you all will have to take to make sure that you don't start a discussion about public business and again, inadvertently create a meeting that was not agendized and not public. So at the meetings, items that can be discussed are those that are agendized. Again, this is really important so that the public knows what business the agency is undertaking and has an opportunity to attend if it's a matter that is important to them and to participate. Action items can only be acted on if they're actually phrased as an action item. So if you have an information item and it's described as an information item, you can't take action on that item at the meeting. There's a very limited exception for emergencies, which is pretty narrowly tailored and narrowly defined. The meetings have to be noticed 72 hours for regular meetings before the meeting takes place, meaning the agenda has to be up and available to the public at least 72 hours before the meeting. There are occasions for special meetings. Those agendas have to be out 24 hours before the meeting. The public must be given an opportunity to provide public comment, and the meetings generally have to be held within the jurisdiction of the agency. So still kind of recent development, a couple of years ago, the legislature adopted AB 992, which was meant to address the intersection between these open meeting laws and social media, particularly given now that members are talking to each other vis-a-vis Twitter and other social media platforms. So AB 992 provides that members of legislative bodies may communicate on social media. A majority of members of a body may not discuss among themselves, again, in a social media forum, business of the legislative body. Members can answer questions, provide information to the public, solicit information from the public regarding a matter that's within the jurisdiction of the legislative body, but members are not allowed to comment or respond directly to each other's comments. So if member A posts something about a matter coming up before the committee on agenda, member B can't like that comment or comment on that comment. Brown Act violations are subject to sanctions. In limited circumstances, Brown Act violations may be considered a misdemeanor. This would require a level of intent and knowing that a violation was occurring with the intent to deprive the public of information that the member knew the public was actually entitled to. More common are sanctions that are done as civil sanctions. So it could be an injunction sought by the district attorney. Sometimes the DA will just send a letter to the agency and say, look, your agency violated the Brown Act. You need to redo that vote. Without going through the process of seeking an injunction. A third party can also seek to invalidate the action that was taken in violation of the Brown Act, and the agency does have a procedural mechanism for curing the defective vote. And I guess, again, a trap for the unwary. If the Brown Act is violated and a plaintiff brings a suit and prevails, then they're entitled to attorney's fees from the agency. And with that, I am done with my presentation.
Do we have any questions from members? Great. No taking Rolexes, no taking bribes, no taking gifts, unless it's family. And thank you just for the presentation, Amber. It's always good to get a refresher on the Brown Act. As well as, just potential conflict of interest in general, so I think really, it's also, it's a good refresher for myself. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Chair Ortiz. Happy to be here.
Do we have any public comment on that? Oh, right, Member Davidson?
I do have one question, which is there, this is not related directly to ethics, but is the Brown Act. Is there any update on whether these meetings could be remote to any point?
Not yet. I don't know if there's any indication that that decision is coming soon, but we will definitely let you guys know once there is any update.
Thank you.
Do we have public comment? Great. Anyone remote?
Checking for remote public comment, and there is no remote public comment.
Perfect. This is an information item, so let's move over to the introduction of new business, which is going to be item 10. Do CAC members have any new business that they would like to bring up? Seeing none, I actually have one item of new business, particularly with a lot of the situation that happened, particularly a couple weeks ago with the Dolores Hill bomb. Oh, sorry, a little bit louder. Particularly around, there's been a lot of questions, particularly around skating infrastructure, available spaces to be able to skate, right? The criminalization of skating in public spaces, et cetera. And this has been kind of an ongoing issue for a long time, particularly with, a lot of the movement around skating is not a crime, et cetera. And from my understanding, there's only really about 5 bona fide skate parks, particularly within the city, and a lot less availability of skate sanctioned available areas. So in accordance with our bylaws for Article 5, I'd like to establish a subcommittee, particularly to look at, available skating infrastructure, particularly here in the city, the available spaces that we have, the laws, particularly around local law, as well as state law, particularly around skating as a whole. And so that way we can make an analysis and a recommendation to the full CAC and then to the full CTA. And since I am the chair, I can also appoint for that. We had initially wanted to do a presentation on this next month, but I think this is going to require a little bit more time, just to kind of look at, a longer term kind of analysis of this. So with that, I'd like to appoint Member Daniels and Member Chen, who have already agreed to be on this subcommittee, along with myself. Does anyone else want to join? You can have a total of 5. Great. Seeing none. Do we have any other public comment? Or remote public comment?
There is no remote public comment for this item.
Great. Let's, so intro of new business is done. Now we have general public comment, which is item 11.
I think you can see from my emails regarding the private commuter buses that many of the buses are operating with expired permits. And keep in mind that an expired permit, MTA has it on a fiscal year basis. So it begins in July and goes to the following June. And so, that's how it's determined whether it's expired or not. And they use the protocol of the little annual sticker dates correspond to the current year's drivers on your automobile sticker. So this year it's blue. And so that's how you can distinguish from a distance. You can see that the violations continue on. As an example, at 24th and Church, probably tomorrow, one day a week will be a mobility inspector. That's the taxi inspector that was taxi. Now they're the mobility inspector. So they go after skateboards and scooters and bicycles on the sidewalk if you call 311 and try to report it. But anyhow, but he'll be there probably tomorrow, from about 7:45 to 8:30-ish or so. But that's the only surveillance that you have from MTA at 24th and Church. Once in a while, there may be an additional PCO, but anyhow, I just wanted to reference to you that there's really very little surveillance of the program that's initiated by MTA. So I'll conclude with that, and good evening to all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mason. Do we have remote public comment from Roland?
Yes. Okay, I'm muting you now. Roland, and go ahead. Your 2 minutes begin now.
Yes, thank you. And through the chair, I did have a follow-up question to, so first of all, we got an excellent response from Muni, I guess MTA earlier on about the timing for the pedestrian crossings, whereby they improved it from 3.5 feet per second to 3 feet. That's a welcome development. But I do believe it does not address the issue of the mobility impaired. And I give you a bunch of examples. Wheelchairs are obvious. The blind, somebody trying to find their way with a cane. The elderly, people with toddlers, people with crutches. There is a long list of people who are mobility impaired. So through the chair, I'm wondering is when the MTA come back to us next time on a Vision Zero, is if they could have some kind of answer or suggestion on how they could modify the timing of a crossing when a person with a special need, needs to cross. And it could be as simple as, tapping a card, a phone, RFID. There has got to be some kind of solution because it's just not safe right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Roland. And there is no further public comment.
Great. So number 12, adjournment. We are adjourned.